All right, in this video, I'm going to walk you through another character design that I did for D&D. In this case, I wanted to draw a human paladin. So I didn't have any special things I wanted to do or wanted to include. As always, I kind of limit my options. So for me, it was actually very straightforward human paladin, very noble guy, a bit roughed up as well, because I always like my characters a bit more roughed up instead of them being super pristine and almost like they came straight out of the box. I like that we actually see characters that have lived life already. So I actually always do that. But then when it came to the design itself, I didn't really have a lot in mind, but I did know like I wanted to base it on some type of animal and just like one animal. I ended up picking the falcon. I didn't really have a reason for it. I was just like, I'm going to base it on a falcon. And it's not like you necessarily see that throughout the design very much. But as always, I did pick like one thing, like a bird in this case, and I exhausted that reference. That's usually what I do because it helps me stay sort of focused. By creating that limitation, I can be more creative within that framework. Going to this, like it's easy to think that what you see here is what I envisioned, and that's not at all the case. So usually, especially when I don't have a brief and it's just like, I'm doing this for myself, I'm doing this for fun. But even when it is for clients, I will just mess around. So the first iteration of this actually looked like this. That's what I do. Like I just scribble and mess around. That's also what I love about digital drawing versus traditional. I mean, you can do this traditionally as well, but then there's a lot of cleaning up to do. So usually with traditional, there's a bit more planning that you need to do. That's what I like about drawing digitally. I don't need to plan. I have layers. And so I can just mess around. But you can see that what I start with and what I end up with are completely different things. And I feel that this is important to highlight because a lot of the times when you see or when you look at finished artwork from artists online, because that's what you want to showcase, right? A lot of the times, well, people don't share their like sketchy stuff, but it is important for you to realize that everyone has their process and it doesn't always look very clean. Like we all have a process that we go through, whether it's like people that photo bash before they start or, people that just make a lot of dirty sketches or like thumbnail a lot of the times. It doesn't really matter what it is, but usually there's like a messy process behind the thing you eventually get to see. So that's important to realize. And then even taking that further is like this is the sketch that I was like, okay, I'll start working with this. So usually, it's not like I'm satisfied with what I have here. It's more like, okay, this is like a base. I'm seeing something come to life. And to give you a bit of an idea of how I go about this, this is literally always what I talk about when it comes to reverse engineering your knowledge into your sketch. So my sketches will be like, okay, I want a head somewhere over here. I want him to, maybe in this case, I want to look up at the character and maybe they're turning away from me a little bit, right? And I want some type of armor on this side and maybe a large pauldron here. I want the hand to be somewhere over here. Maybe he's holding something, right? And then I want him to stand like this. I'll start ideating literally like this. That's all I do. And then when I find something that I'm like, oh, this might work, I'll keep it or I'll move it around. That's the beautiful thing about digital art is like you can just literally mess around as much as you want. And so that is what I do. And what I'm doing here is I'm basing it on the knowledge that I have of form, perspective, and camera angles and some design, graphic design. So I'm basing it all on that. It's not like I'm just praying to God that something will appear. It's more like I'm using my knowledge, but in a very, very loose way, just to get inspired, especially when you're doing it for yourself. Like there's no right or wrong here. Like I can literally just mess around and have fun with it. So I end up with this sketch, and you'll see this in my other illustrations as well. Like for instance, this one that is more like just a scene practice. Like it's not like I have this completely in mind. I'll mess around and just see like what shapes are working, what angle do I like, what composition do I like, where do I want to put the emphasis, and I can figure most of this out in the sketch. That's the fun thing about it. In this messy sketch, I can figure out most of the things, and that is what makes it very interesting for me. Now, before you do anything else, make sure that you click the link in the description and get our free ebook. This book is absolutely fantastic. It gives you an insight into primarily what you'll be learning in our Artwatt Beginner Road and applying, and it will give you these aha moments into how we at Artwatt make you intuitive at perspective and how we really help you better to draw from imagination in a very approachable manner, especially our staple unique approach to form manipulation that you won't learn anywhere else on how to really look at form, how to be able to manipulate form that then turns into actual believable things that you can draw from imagination. We sort of want to unveil some of the secrets we have at Artwatt on how to better get people into learning to draw from imagination. That's what this book is for. That will naturally kind of give you a hunger to do more, as it should, because drawing is awesome, especially when you can do it from imagination. Click the link in the description, get this book. It's truly awesome, and it's free. Now, after this, I do get into fairly clean line work usually, but not like super detailed yet. What I'm focusing on here is usually like what kind of expression or just character phase do I want? And then what are the big shapes of the design that I definitely want to see here? So again, just like painting, it's not only like in painting or in illustration that you work from big to small, it's also in drawing or settling into a design. It's, okay, I want something in this vicinity. I want my shapes to look like this. And again, I was basing this on a falcon design because I knew I was going to have some bird-inspired shapes in here. And that's what I was focusing on. I wasn't using reference. The reason I did this is because I wanted to be as free as possible in how I create these shapes. I didn't really want to be manipulated by any reference that I was looking at. I also just wasn't interested in really making it super realistic or super believable or even super functional. Like this armor isn't necessarily super functional or super realistic, but it has like, it's good enough, you know? I can convince you that this is armor, and that's good enough. I've done enough armor studies to sort of wing it and cheat my way into making something believable. So I could rely on that internal library and just sort of start ideating and creating shapes that I like, that I want to work with. But as you can see here, like if we look at the finished illustration, it's like, even when I started refining, this is not what I end up with. And that's something I think you should notice as well. Like you're not, especially in digital, you're not locked in, right? It's not like this is the final. As soon as you start refining, well, now it's over. This is the final. You can always change it, right? And even in professional art, you see this all the time. Professional illustration, splash art that you enjoy, but also just designs, cool designs that you see, they get changed and altered so much. If you want to go to a professional level, it's part of what makes you a professional. Is like, nothing's final. We can change it. We can work with it. We can alter it because you have enough knowledge to just change whatever you want, essentially. So after that, I end up with this final. So this is where I am settling into my design. I'm like, okay, I want this. I want the shapes to be like this. I'm sort of convinced of the distribution of the detail that I want. I like everything going on here. This is the moment where I'll usually go into color. Now, it depends on what I want to end up with. And what I mean by that is like, I can further refine this drawing and make it like a drawing, like a finished drawing. Or I can go in and make it into a painting. And I always feel like if I'm going to make it into a painting, I don't need that much detail in my drawing. I just need enough for me to understand where I want to put detailing and how I'm going to render it. But all in all, I don't need to really create a super refined version of the drawing. And then I'll just start coloring. So I'll usually just fill in the silhouette and I'll just start coloring in individual parts of the armor. And so, by the way, this is not the first version that I did. Actually, the first version that I did was like in the typical sort of paladin sense of like, oh, I'm going to completely make it gold plated. Eventually, I chose not to do that because it was a lot of yellow and a lot of gold, and I just couldn't really balance it. So therefore, I opted for something a little bit more down to earth, again, a little bit more grounded and a little bit more believable than the gold-plated armor. But all in all, you can go with any color that you want, right? That's the beautiful thing about having these layers and doing it digitally. I do want to specify something very specific, by the way, if we go back to the drawing, and this is something that will take experience, is that a lot of the times why you'll see online that they will suggest you to do thumbnails. So thumbnails in the sense like you start with literal graphic shapes like this, and based on those graphic shapes, you can start filling in like details, right? A lot of times you'll see this for ideation. Now, the reason that this is suggested, and I think it's a good method if you're starting out, is if you're a beginner, it will be very hard for you to understand what a good silhouette looks like. And so therefore, you almost just need to start with the silhouette so that you can at least see how the silhouette will work or not work, right? If it continues to be like a messy blob for a very long time, then your drawing, however you want to refine it, is going to be messy as well. So focusing on a good silhouette is really going to help you sort of circumvent that and make sure that you're focusing on interesting readability of the silhouette. However, if you are fairly advanced or you really understand form and drawing and design, you can do it in the drawing because basically I'm looking at the drawing and I can see the silhouette. It's one of the reasons that I opt to change this, for instance, to something else, is because I didn't like the silhouette and I didn't even fill it in yet. But I'm like, I'm not going to like this silhouette eventually. And therefore, I chose to do this. It looks more badass, and that's why I want it. So, but I can already envision the silhouette based on the drawing. I don't need the silhouette to then create my drawing, right? It's just a bit of an experience thing that eventually you will get or you will understand as well. Right, so then I colored it. And for me, this is an important phase because I want to make sure that sort of the distribution of color is working. I'm not the best at color. That's why usually I keep everything grounded. But I also just like down-to-earth character designs that are a little bit more grounded and believable. So I want to make sure from a graphic point of view, if we take away the line art, that it still reads pretty well. And so this has to do with more internal silhouette and distribution of color, distribution of values. I want to make sure that the silhouette itself, the color scheme, works if I don't have my line art. Right? So that's why I usually will experiment a lot. I've changed the color of the yellow and the banner and the cape and the armor like 1,000 times to sort of settle on something that I was pleased with. And then eventually, when I'm pleased with it, then I'll go into rendering it. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to tell you guys about rendering that will be a best practice if you go and render your own characters. Because a lot of times I see people that get confused with rendering or they don't know really where to start. I just want to point out that always seems very daunting to go from something like this to this. But all in all, it's just like, it's just starting somewhere. For me, at least it is. But the important thing to remember is that a lot of the times people will get lost in detail. So they will start over rendering every part of the design. And you'll see with my designs very often is that just like an illustration, I keep a focal point at a certain region. So for me, in this case, it was like, I definitely want you to see this. I don't care that much about everything else. So what I did literally is like, you can see that I made a fade here. So I just clip masked it and faded the background color into that silhouette so that it becomes more pushed into the background and it doesn't become that much of a focal point. So let's say this is my focal point area, right? And everything else has less contrast. So there's not a lot of contrast here, like no contrast, or like let's say, little contrast. And then here is high contrast, so that your eyes immediately look more here than they do here. You can still go around and explore and find out the details about the design, but overall, I'm keeping most of it up here where I want you to look. Now, another thing that I find very important, that I've talked about this before in other videos, but a lot of the times when people start rendering their designs or their characters or their creatures or whatever it is, because there's so many elements, right? There's a lot of elements here for rendering. And so what they start focusing on is all of those elements individually. And what ends up happening a lot of the times is that this highlight that I have right here, right? You'll suddenly start to see an equally bright highlight here and here and here and here. And what it does, it actually takes away from the overall believability and lighting of the character. Now, the reason I say that is because what you should think about is when you light your very complex character, you should still treat it as an egg. So in the beginning, you learn to like light an egg, right? And it's very easy to understand that an egg has one highlight, one area of focus, and then the rest falls into either shadow or halftone, right? And you should treat your design the same way. Overall, it's still an egg. And so there's going to be one thing that's going to have a higher contrast than everything else. Even though in reality that sometimes might not be the case, we're artists, we're designers. It's not about creating realism, it's about creating believability. And that's also very important, and I want to address that because a lot of the times when you start learning about lighting and you learn about, okay, the light source is coming here, we have cast shadows, we have bounce light, all of that, great. But what you end up doing is you end up thinking too much about reality. You're like, oh, if light is coming from this side, then the highlight definitely needs to be here, and there definitely needs to be cast shadows this way. Like, it's not possible for the cast shadow to be anything else. And like whatever it is, right? Like, oh, the cast shadow here needs to be a certain way because the light source is coming from that side. And this is where you have artistic liberty. It shouldn't be realistic. It should be believable, but above all, beautiful to look at. And this is what they do in film as well, and animation. What you're seeing is not real light. They have spotlights and fill lights to kill some shadows or to create different cast shadows. In animation, they literally have invisible light sources on the characters to light them better than what would actually realistically be the case. And so a lot of the times you want to invoke your creative license, your creative liberty to create a cast shadow that just looks good. It doesn't need to be believable. It just needs to look good. And when you focus on that, you'll usually end up with something that is more pleasing to look at instead of something that looks very realistic. Because realism sometimes is very noisy and not cool to look at. I mean, take a picture with your phone in sunlight and you'll know what I mean, right? That's why we go to a studio with artificial lights to make it more pleasing. And you, in this case, are the artist. You're the director of photography. You are in control of what the light source is, on what kind of armor you want to shine it and which ones you don't want to shine it, because there could be highlights here, right, based on my light source. I'm not putting them there because I don't want you to focus there. So that's what you should keep in mind when you're rendering, when you want to create something that is believable, but still like artistically and graphically pleasing. And so that's it. My human paladin with my process of how I work, it's almost always the same thing. I start very, very sketchy, then I start refining things. If I run into a block, I will use reference. For instance, I did look up reference of falcons just to give me some inspiration. But all in all, I like to stay reference-free as long as possible. Not to flex, but this is like a personal illustration. I don't need reference. I can just build on what I know and have fun with the shapes. And sometimes this is very good for you to do, like just have fun with those shapes, see if you can recall information that you've studied in the past. If you need reference, then by all means look up reference, right? Like I said before, keep it limited so you can be creative, but you can definitely use reference. I mean, I would highly encourage it. When I did professional work, I always used reference, by the way. But if it's personal work and you can get away with whatever that doesn't work or isn't necessarily realistic or even believable, I mean, why not, right? That's artistic liberty as well. But like I said, that's my process. That's how I go about things. And those things that I said about rendering, try to keep them in mind because they can be helpful to keep you more focused on what to do with your light sources and not to be too concerned with perfect cast shadows or very realistic cast shadows, because at the end of the day, you're in control of your painting and you just want to make it look good, not necessarily realistic. All right, that's it. Hope it was useful, and I'll see you in the next one.